A German traveler named Paul Hentzner visited the English court in 1598 and wrote one sentence about Queen Elizabeth I's teeth. He said, "Her teeth are black, a defect the English seem subject to from their too great use of sugar." He said it the way you say something everyone already knows. Elizabeth was 65 years old in 1598. She had been Queen of England for 40 years. She had defeated the Spanish Armada. She had executed her own cousin. She had kept the most powerful court in Europe running on a combination of political genius and controlled terror for 4 decades. She could not stop eating the food that was rotting her alive. This is what Queen Elizabeth I was actually eating, and why, for 69 years, the most powerful woman in England had almost no control over what went into her body. There is one specific detail, something her own physicians prescribed to her regularly as medicine, that was simultaneously the primary cause of the damage they were trying to treat. That detail is coming. First, the table. The Elizabethan royal kitchen at Greenwich Palace in 1575 employed approximately 200 men working across 55 rooms. It produced up to 800 meals twice a day. The annual wood bill alone ran to approximately 1.3 million logs, just to keep the fires burning. Every year, the Tudor court consumed roughly 1,240 oxen, 8,200 sheep, 2,330 deer, 1,870 pigs, and 53 wild boar, over 14,000 large animals a year, plus thousands of birds, fish, and game. This was not gluttony. This was foreign policy. Every dish that appeared on Elizabeth's table carried a message. The quantity of food communicated the wealth of the crown. The quality of the ingredients communicated the reach of England's trade networks. The elaborateness of the presentation communicated the sophistication of the court. Foreign ambassadors sat at that table and sent reports home about what they had seen, because the food was information. A queen who could afford sugar sculptures carved into castles and ships and heraldic beasts, displayed on a 6-tier sideboard before a single dish was served, was a queen whose treasury was worth taking seriously. Elizabeth understood this. She had been raised to understand it, and so she ate what the table required. Not what her body needed, not what her physicians should have recommended, but what her position demanded. What her position demanded, above everything else, was sugar. In 1560, refined sugar cost approximately 10 pennies per pound in England, roughly the equivalent of 12 pounds sterling in modern money per pound of sugar. To use it freely was to demonstrate purchasing power that most people in England could not imagine across their entire lifetime. The Elizabethan court used it constantly, in everything. Sugar went into the marchpane, the marzipan sculptures that decorated the table before a meal began. It went into the hippocras, the spiced wine that closed every formal dinner. It went into the conserves, the candied fruits, the sweet pastries that constituted an entire separate course. It went into savory meat dishes to balance the salt of preserved protein. It was mixed into medicine. It was offered between meals as a mark of hospitality to important visitors. The royal accounts from the 1570s record sugar purchased in quantities of hundreds of pounds at a time, not per year, per delivery. Elizabeth herself had a specific weakness for sweetmeats, the candied and sugar-preserved fruits and nuts that were served at the close of formal meals. Contemporary accounts describe her eating them throughout the day, not only at meals. By the 1580s, her consumption of sugar in various forms was, by any reasonable estimate, extraordinary. But here's what nobody around her was saying plainly. Drop a comment right now. If your own physician told you in 1570 that sugar was medicine, prescribed it regularly, told you more was better, would you have questioned it? And tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. The physician who treated Elizabeth in the 1570s and 1580s was operating on a medical framework that had been accepted for over 1,000 years. The human body contained 4 humors. Disease was an imbalance. Treatment was corrected. Sugar, within this framework, was classified not only as a food, but as a medicinal substance with warming and restorative properties. It was used to treat coughs. It was used to preserve other medicines. It was understood to be appropriate, even necessary, for people of refined constitution, whose bodies were considered more delicate than those of common people. The logic was internally consistent. Elevated status meant a more refined body. A more refined body required more refined food. Sugar was the most refined food substance available. Therefore, people of elevated status should consume more sugar. Elizabeth's physicians prescribed it, not cautiously, routinely. When she had a cough in 1573, sugar in warm wine, When she had digestive complaints in 1581, sugar mixed with other compounds. When her energy flagged in 1589, the year after the Armada, sugar as a restorative, the medicine that was supposed to maintain the health of the royal body, was the substance most efficiently destroying it. The physicians were not frauds. They were working with the best understanding of their time. That understanding was wrong about sugar in the same way it was wrong about bloodletting, completely, systematically, and in ways that the people operating inside it had no mechanism for detecting. But the teeth were only the beginning. What was happening inside was considerably worse. By 1590, Elizabeth was 57 years old and had lost a significant number of teeth. Not yellowed, gone. She had begun stuffing cloth inside her cheeks when receiving important visitors, to fill out the sunken appearance that extensive tooth loss creates. Foreign ambassadors reported in their dispatches that her speech had become difficult to understand at times. The woman who had spoken in public for 40 years, whose words had shaped English history, who had delivered the Tilbury speech in 1588 standing before her army as the Armada approached, was stuffing rags in her mouth to maintain the appearance of a face. But the teeth were visible. What was happening internally was not. The Elizabethan royal diet combined its extraordinary sugar consumption with an almost complete absence of vegetables. In 1570, this was not preference or oversight. It was medical orthodoxy. Raw vegetables and fresh fruit were considered dangerous for people of refined constitution. Medical theory in the 16th century held that raw food was appropriate for people whose digestive systems were hardened by coarse living. For a queen, whose body was assumed to be more delicate, raw vegetables were understood as a source of fever, cramps, and digestive disruption. Elizabeth's physicians advised against them. She ate almost none for 60 years. The consequence was scurvy, the disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, more commonly associated with sailors on long voyages without fresh food. Elizabeth I, living in a palace surrounded by gardens that produced fruit and vegetables in abundance, had access to every fresh food England could grow. She ate almost none of it. On medical advice, her gums deteriorated progressively through the 1580s and 1590s. Her teeth loosened. Her skin showed the slow healing and easy bruising that characterizes chronic vitamin C deficiency. The condition progressed not because anyone was negligent, but because the physician standing beside her believed he was helping and had no way of knowing he was not. The garden was outside the window. The physician said not to eat what grew in it. The meat on Elizabeth's table arrived in two forms: fresh for feast days and important occasions, slaughtered that morning, roasted whole, displayed with ceremony. A single feast day in 1575 at Kenilworth Castle, hosted by the Earl of Leicester for the Queen, required the slaughter of enough animals to feed 3,000 people per day for 19 days. The accounts survive. Preserved for ordinary meals, salted and smoked in autumn, stored through winter, requiring soaking for 12 to 24 hours before cooking to reduce the salt content to survivable levels. The preserved meat that made up the majority of protein in the Elizabethan diet was fatty, aggressively salty even after soaking, and one-dimensional in flavor. The sugar and the spices that appeared in every savory dish were not there for pleasure. They were there to make the preserved meat edible. White bread was constant. White because the finer milling required to produce it made it expensive, and expensive made it a status marker as visible as any item of clothing. By the 1560s, Elizabeth's daily bread consumption was white, fine, and sweetened. Dark bread was for people who could not afford the alternative. The ale was present throughout the day, not because the court was intemperate, because London's water in 1560 was genuinely dangerous, and everyone who could afford an alternative drank one. The ale was weak by modern standards, approximately 2 to 3% alcohol, consumed in quantities of 6 to 10 pints per person per day as the primary safe liquid. Elizabeth drank it moderately compared to her father Henry VIII, whose documented consumption was considerably higher, but she drank it daily for 60 years. The wine arrived sweetened and spiced, with sugar in the hippocras that closed every formal meal. Calories were substantial. Nutrition, by any modern measure, was not. In 1601, Elizabeth was 68 years old, 2 years before her death. She had stopped eating, not dramatically, gradually. The appetite that had sustained 60 years of royal dining simply faded through 1601 and into 1602. She sat at meals and moved food without consuming it. Her counselors worried. Her physicians prescribed sugar in warm wine to stimulate the appetite. In January 1603, she sat down in a chair and declined to move. Not from weakness alone, from something less diagnosable than weakness. Her ladies could not persuade her to go to bed. She sat in the chair for days. The woman who had hunted into her 50s, who had danced publicly well past the age when her court expected her to stop, who had maintained the performance of physical vitality as a deliberate political statement for 4 decades, sat in a chair, in silence, and looked at the wall. She died on March 24th, 1603. She was 69 years old. For a woman who had survived smallpox in 1562, a disease that killed the majority of those who contracted it, the constant political threat of assassination across 4 decades, and the physical demands of maintaining a court performance that never fully rested, 69 was not a short life. But the body that carried her through it had been systematically damaged by the food it was required to eat. The sugar that signaled her status rotted her teeth and deprived her gums of the structural integrity that vitamin C would have maintained. The absence of vegetables, on medical advice from 1560 onward, removed the one dietary element that might have partially compensated. The preserved meat and the white bread and the sweetened wine maintained her caloric needs across 6 decades, while providing almost nothing that her body could use for repair. The cloth she stuffed in her cheeks in 1590 to maintain the appearance of a face is the detail that stays with you, not the armada defeated in 1588, not the execution of Mary Queen of Scots in 1587, not the 45 years of political genius that kept England stable while the rest of Europe burned. The rags in her mouth in front of foreign ambassadors, maintaining a performance that her own diet had made necessary. Power in 1560, as in any other century, did not protect you from the consequences of what you put in your body. It protected you from being told what those consequences were. Elizabeth's physicians told her sugar was medicine. Her court told her vegetables were beneath her. Her status told her the elaborate sweetened table was proof of her greatness. All of them were wrong, and she paid for it every time she raised her hand to cover her mouth before she spoke. The next video in this series goes inside the Tudor kitchen, the place that produced everything you have just seen. 200 men, 55 rooms, 1.3 million logs per year, and a supply chain that consumed 14,000 animals annually to feed a court that was being slowly destroyed by what it was eating. Which historical figure's diet should we examine next? Drop it in the comments below, and tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. Subscribe, that video is already waiting.